Hello again. I know you know who this is, so I'm not going to introduce myself. Okay. All right. We are going to do case study 4, meat packing operation. Now, we covered case studies 1 and 2. We're going to skip 3. I didn't particularly think that was all that appropriate. So we're going to do 4 and 5 in this module. So case study 4 is a meat packing operation. So let's get to it. Well, the primary exposures in meat packing operations, beef, pork, poultry, is biomechanical or musculoskeletal hazards. Standard risk assessment methods are not designed to identify and analyze such hazards. Therefore, methods that pinpoint ergonomic risk factors, such as screening and assessment tools, ergonomic risk assessment tool, can be used. ERAT was developed by the authors. It was based on the draft ANSI Z365 ergonomics checklist that was part of the Management of Work-Related Musculoskeletal Disorders Accredited Standards Committee Z365 working draft, which was withdrawn in 2003. So I don't know why they withdrew it. Anyhow, but there are a lot of ergonomic assessment tools, a Rula, Reba type of thing. And if we'll cover them in ergonomics class. Now, we don't cover this one because I've never heard of this one before, because this was just invented by these people. But it's a good one, and we're going to look at it. And I couldn't find anything on it. When I looked up ERAT, all I got was the first third person plural of a Latin word or something like that. That's the guy's name. So anyhow, let's go ahead and take a look at it. It's a pretty good one. So in this case study, the authors selected the ERAT tool because they wrote it to perform an ergonomic risk assessment of a pork processing task. ERAT, which provides a standardized method of quickly identifying, assessing, and scoring ergonomic risks to upper extremities, uses an initial assessment worksheet and a post-controls assessment worksheet to establish risk factor scores. A hierarchy of ergonomic risk controls is included to define risk treatment options. Now, most of these ergonomic risk treatment tool, risk assessment tools focus on the upper arms and upper body. And that makes a lot of sense because most of your ergonomic injuries are coming from your arms and back. So, and of course, neck too, if it's twisted or tilted from when you have those awkward postures, which is one of the big risk factors in ergonomics, it's frequently a lot of time with the neck also. So this is going to be for the arms and upper extremities, and that makes a lot of sense. ERAT is a targeted assessment of ergonomic risk factors impacting the upper extremities, which can be applied to office environments and assembly type work too. Assembly type work, typically, you're using your arms and hands and back, not so much your legs. The initial assessment worksheet is used to develop a baseline risk score and action level with possible control measures to reduce risk factor scores. So the baseline means, okay, that's what they're doing. Now let's take a look at it and score it the way it's being done right now. The post-controls assessment worksheet is used after the initial assessment and implementation of control measures to establish a current risk factor scores. So you go ahead, do the initial assessment, look at it, pick out what you want to do, assess it further, do a risk matrix, look at the hierarchy of controls, apply some controls, and then you want to do assessment again. And that's a very logical progression. Tasks selected and studied, tasks with a history of musculoskeletal disorders, MSDs, and employee complaints were reviewed and targeted for the assessment. The risk assessment team, using digital video, recorded task cycles of the job selected from a variety of angles to capture normal work activities and conditions. Weights of objects handled, tools used, distances, dimensions were collected to further analyze. Video is used to study task repetition, postures, lifts, pulls, pushes, carries, and other factors covered by the assessment tool. Very good way to do it. Take a video of it, then you can watch it, measure it, and from a lot of different angles they took it to. And the history came from employee musculoskeletal history of musculoskeletal disorders. Okay, you hear me say this before. Where are you going to find this history at? They kind of want to avoid it in this whole book, and I don't know why they just come out and say it. Where are you going to get a history of musculoskeletal disorders? Two places, right? Workers' comp logs and OSHA logs, excuse me, and workers' comp history. And they'll be the same. Will be on both of those most of the time. But anyhow, that's a good place to look at these things to get to look at when you're looking. If you were going to go into, let's say, a brand new business. Your first hire is in safety. You want to find out what's going on. You look at the OSHA logs. You have a pretty good idea. Okay, and so that's a common way of doing it. Complaints too. That's a big. And I've said this many times before. If you're a safety professional, walking through the plant, and an employee comes up to you with a safety issue. And if you can possibly do it at all, that goes number one on your hit parade, because you want to get that thing taken care of. You want to let people to know that if they have a legitimate problem, they come to you, you're going to do something about it. Now, and if you can't do something about it, and that happens too, then you go back to the employee and you tell them why and ask if they have any other suggestions. So that's one of the fun parts of the job, is talking to employees. Pork belly grading involves two operators standing at the end of an incoming conveyor approximately waist high. Each worker manually grabs individual pork bellies using one hand and then turn and place on an adjacent weighing scale. Right off the bat, there's some bells going off here if you know anything about ergonomics, okay? Using one hand and turning, big no-nos. The work visually grades the belly quickly and then tosses it with one arm into one of several bins approximately 6 to 8 feet away. Probably should say the worker does that. The work pace for each worker is approximately 10 bellies a minute, equating approximately 60 per hour or 480 bellies per 8-hour shift. That's every 6 seconds, 10 bellies a minute. All right. Pork bellies weigh between 11 and 14 pounds each, with an average around 13 pounds. 13 pounds doesn't sound like much. 480 times a day, it adds up. So this is a form we're going to discuss right off the bat here. That's the best I can get it onto the screen here. This is the ergonomic task and screening tool, the initial assessment. Now, I'm not going to go over the details now, but we're going to in the next, we'll go to each one. But here's what it has. It has 6 areas: repetition, lift, push, pull, carry over 10 feet, postures, environment. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 6. Okay, so far math is good. Duration of task here. It's 3 categories: less than an hour, 1 to 4, over 4. Same over here. Okay, and these numbers here are in there already. These numbers are part of the form, okay? And here's where you're going to put your numbers, all right, or whatever. So, again, as most ergonomic assessment type tools, you always have a duration factor, obviously. If you're lifting up something, that weighs 40 pounds once a day, it's not going to be an ergonomic issue. If you're doing it every few minutes and over 4 hours, yeah, it's going to be. We're going to do something almost every 4 hours, every few minutes. It's going to do something every few seconds, which is pretty close to what they're doing here. 6 seconds is probably every few seconds. So that's the duration factor in here. And then the scores. The scores are here. Scores column 1, scores column 2. And then you get a subtotal over here, which is subtotal of column 1, subtotal of column 1, subtotal of column 2. And then the total over here, which in this particular case is 23. As you can see, 23 is on the action level. 2336 is the red. It's 3. We'll talk about that too. So the ARAT form has 6 risk factor categories. Each category then has 3 duration periods to choose from: 1 less than an hour, 1 to 4 hours, and 4 hours. And I want to go this over because this is a good form. You can adapt it to a lot of upper body movement type of things. It's a little bit easier, I think, to use than a Rula and Reba. Rulers rapid upper limb assessment. So let's take a look at it. So repetition is just two things: every few minutes or every few seconds. Pretty simple. Lifting: 5 to 15 pounds, 16 to 30 pounds, 31 to 50 pounds, over 50 pounds. That's your 4 categories. So it's pretty simple. Push pull force: easy, moderate, heavy. You have to figure that one out. Carrying loads more than 10 feet. Now think about this for a minute. If you're going to carry something at 2 feet, probably not so bad. If you're carrying something 10 feet, you're holding it for a while. All right. So 5 to 15 pounds, 16 to 30 pounds, over 30 pounds. If you're going to carry something over 30 pounds, 10 feet all day long, it's going to get to you. Postures: head tilt, forward, backward, to the side. Anyway, backward, anyway, your head tilt. That's always bad. Shoulder reach, arm extension like this. Do that once in a while, fine. Do it all day long, problem. Flying elbow, shoulder abduction, which is like this, raised elbow. It doesn't really fly, okay? Don't look for it way up in the air. It's going to be still attached, but all right. Bent wrist deviation, ulnar, radial, flexion or extension, or a pinch grip. Now, that's kind of cool. They put these in the same place because you're probably not going to have a pinch grip. Is this grip like this. And then a chicken business, when you're pulling tenders, the carcass comes down the line on a cone called a cone line. The breasts are removed, and inside the chest cavity there are the chicken tenders. And it's hard to get out because they're inside it. And you have to grab them with a pinch grip and pull them out. So it's a very ergonomically challenging job. Bend or twist waist, back flexion or extension, or bending to the side, twisting at the waist. Any way you're twisting is bad. Like, so that's one thing I like about this is it's the categories aren't real fine, real small. So you'll have a lot of them, and it's relatively simple. Environmental factors: noise noticeably interfering with communication or comfort. Notice there's no decibel here. Does not say so many decibels. But as you know, or if you may not know if you've taken any later classes, if you're standing at a plant, and you're like normal distance away from somebody, about 3 feet away, normal talking distance in a plant, and you can't have a normal conversation, it's probably too noisy in there. That's one of the indications of you need a hearing conservation program if you can't carry on a normal conversation at a regular distance. Lighting or glare: inadequate or excessive light for task, direct or indirect glare interfering with the task, noticeable eye strain caused by lighting. Most of the time, lighting's an issue. It's usually not enough, but it could be too much or glare. Impact compression: impact to soft tissues from tools, handles, parts. Using your hand as a hammer, that's not a good idea. Hard edges causing compression to soft tissue on arms, legs, or other body parts. A real common one is your forearm on the edge of a table. And that's usually for working like at a bench. If you're sitting at a desk, that's usually not so much. But if you're like at a lab and there's a high bench and you have your arm against that corner of it, that's not very good. That's what they're talking about here: impact or compression. And again, I like how they put these things in a sensible way together. Vibration / power tools: whole body vibration from equipment, and whole body vibration means just what it says. And that's usually because you're inside a truck or a crane or something that vibrates, and your whole body's vibrating. But then, or hand arm vibration, which is usually from power tools, could be other things, but usually when you're using any kind of power tool, there's hand arm vibration, and ergonomically, again, over a period of time, it could cause you a lot of damage. Still more environmental factors: excessive pace, noticeable difficulty in maintaining pace, lack of control over pace, or lack of recovery time. Recovery time is when you're doing a particular difficult job and you do it for a little bit and you get a little bit time to recover. You have a break, pretty much. It might not be a break from work, just a break from doing that job. And that's very important. Extreme temperature: cold temperatures affecting hands, feet, or other body parts, or heat stress. They just said heat stress, but heat in general, and that's heat stress is one of the levels you get to when there's excessive heat. But so extreme temperatures. So the way they did this is pretty doggone good, in my opinion. Now, there's some notes on the form that were hard to read if you look just at the form, so I put them right here. It says use: the ergonomic task analysis screening tool is limited to analysis of ergonomic risk factors impacting upper extremities and is appropriate for office work, assembly, and process line work environment. The initial evaluation, i.e. worksheet, is used to develop a baseline risk score and action level with possible control measures to reduce risk factor scores. It is suggested that videotape analysis be used to study task repetition, postures, lifts, pulls, pushes, carries, and other factors covered by the screening tools. And then there's an instruction also on the form. It says instructions. Good title for instructions, isn't it? For each row that applies, score the task based on the duration and observed risk factor. For individual scores of 2 or more, control measures may be needed and included in the screening tool worksheet. Add the score in the subtotal and total columns. If the total sum of ergonomic risk factors identified is equal to or greater than 10, action level 1, it indicates the need for further evaluation. If the total is between 11 and 22, action level 2, it requires intervention in the near future. And if the total exceeds 22, action level 3, immediate intervention is required. And there's action levels right on the form. So that's another thing to say about this form. It's got a lot of stuff on it that helps you explain it. Okay, initial scores were determined as follows. This is the initial scores. Repetition score was 3, because it cycles every few minutes with a duration of more than 4 hours. Now we're going back to the job, the pork belly grading. Lift score was 1, average weight is 13 pounds each, which duration of more than 4 hours. Push-pull score was 3, repetitive one-arm throwing motion is considered physically demanding with a duration of more than 4 hours. I would think it's very demanding. And even if you're a pretty strong person, doing the one arm throwing all day long, not good. The posture's head tilt score. They had to have their head tilted to do this. Shoulder reach score. They had to reach for stuff. Repetitive shoulder extension. postures performed for more than 4 hours. Flying elbow score, repeated elevated elbow shoulder abduction postures performed for more than 4 hours. Bent wrist pinch grip scores, 2. Repetitive bent wrist and pinch grip during handling of bellies performed for more than 4 hours. Bending twisting score, 1. Periodic twisting at waist while tossing bellies to bin. I would have thought the twisting score would have been higher than that, but the noise score, 2. Hearing conservation area with protection being used. Lighting score, 2. Light levels and quality inadequate for inspection tasks. Well, I don't know how they can do inspections if they didn't have light. Light was inadequate for them. That's not good. Excessive pace score, 2. Physical effort required at a 10 per minute pace performed for more than 4 hours. And in other words, they said they had no control over this and they can't take breaks or anything. Extreme temperature score, 2. Cold ambient temperatures require use of protective gloves and clothing. The initial assessment of this task score has a score of 23, which is action level 3 and requires immediate intervention. So that's the completed form. Like we talked about, here's the scores that we talked about, the 3 up here. And they got 9 points over here and over here, head tilt, shoulder reaching, flying elbow, all the stuff here. And then NA, which means that they're not use power tools, keyboards. That's not at all a factor. Excessive pace, they got 14 points over here, so 23 points. Here's your action levels, and here's the 2 notes that we talked about. So this form in and of itself is very well done in my opinion. A lot of the information's on the front of it. It's not. Once I figured out where these came from, that they were already there, and you had it right in here. That was the biggest question I had, and was pretty easily resolved. So it's a pretty good score. So now intervention. The resulting interventions involved engineering controls, including inline weighing scales placed in a new conveyor system, placement of chutes and bins beneath the conveyor system, eliminating the need for the excessive handling and throwing tasks. The engineering control measures also help to eliminate or reduce a number of extreme repetitive postures. So this is just basically a hierarchy of controls, and this is one of them, ergonomic. It's really not any different than the other ones, but here's the avoidance in the conceptual phase. Prevent it. You just don't even have it. Effectiveness that high. Well, I guess if it's not even there, elimination effectiveness is pretty high too. Eliminate the hazard by changes in design, equipment, methods, substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, PPE. Okay, you know all this pretty much. So this is basically your standard hierarchy controls with what they got thrown in, what avoidance thrown in, and that's usually when you do this in a planning stage. That's like PTD. That's where your avoidance can come in, because you're going to just say this, you're planning on doing this, and somebody else says, no, let's not do this, and then you just avoid it. But and that's just shoulder ergo hazards. And this is the proposed solution: scale placed in line, drag bellies off conveyors into bins, eliminate reach with placement of bins. So it looked to me like if anybody with a little bit of ergonomic training walked by this operation, they would probably stop and camp there for a while and take a look at it. So then they did a post-control assessment. This is the ergonomic task and screening tool post-controls assessment, and it's pretty similar. The duration, all this stuff is the same, but now you have controls, and they couldn't change anything to this. This is going to happen at that same time period. So see that couldn't change. Now engineering controls reduce handling by 50%. Okay, so they reduced the handling of it a lot. Pork bellies, they eliminated a lot of this. So this was a 9, it's now a 4. Now over here, head tilt and all this stuff, they eliminated reach with placement of bins. Still had a little bit of here. They had to get a 1, or they still have to grip it. So noise didn't change, pace didn't change. The lighting was not a factor, evidently, and they said it was. So, but there was no change there. So they took this from a 14 down to a 5. 5 and 4 is 9. Now your total is 9, and you know what 9 is. It was action level 1, low risk. So that was a pretty good assessment tool there that they thought of. It's hard to come up with a test assessment tool for ergonomic assessment, and so that's the gist of that whole case study. And again, I thought this a very, very good case study, and that tool, Even if you take the ergonomics course, you're going to find a lot of other ergonomic tools, but you won't see that one because I've never seen that one before. And I looked it up on the internet, couldn't find anything out about it, but there it is. It's probably pretty new. And I would hope that in the down the road a little ways, it wends its way into the ergonomic field or world as a good tool for upper arms, because that's where most of your upper arms, back, neck, that's where the vast majority of your ergonomic injuries are. So that's the end of that one. So meanwhile, next time you have to raid pork bellies, you'll be glad they did that. In the meantime, be safe.